Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 24th, 2024 El Dorado Irrigation District Board Meeting. May I have roll call, please?
Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Day, Veerkamp, and Anzini present. General Manager Abercrombie, Senior Deputy General Counsel Leeper, and Board Clerk Sullivan present.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, do I hear a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on the adoption of today's agenda? Not on individual items, but on the adopting of the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda for instructions. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda. Moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. Jim, do we have any employee recognition this morning?
Yes, I do. Thank you. The district received a call from Scott, one of our customers, in appreciation with 3 of our employees, Joel Beal, distribution operator, Don Holland, distribution operator, and Seth Barbara, chief construction and maintenance worker. Scott praised them for their professionalism, politeness, knowledge, and effective communication in resolving his issue. So again, just a sign of great, excellent service to our customers. Thank you, Joel, Don, and Seth.
Excellent. Always like to hear that. Thank you. All right. Is there any public comment on EID-related items not on today's agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda for instructions. President Day, it doesn't appear any members of the public are wishing to speak.
All right. Thank you. We'll return to communications. Jim?
Nothing to report today. Thank you.
Lori, do you have anything?
Yes, just quickly, LAFCO has no meeting in June. We did approve the final budget in May. It's now at the auditor for determination on how much everybody's share will be, so hang in there, Jim. You'll get it, should get it in August, and they're seeking a public member. That ballot process will be going out as well, and it will meet again July 24th.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Pat?
Yes, thank you. I attended the El Dorado County Water Agency Board on 12 June, and the board took action to approve the budget for the water agency. The budget's about $12.5 million. Most of that is grant funds. About $4 million comes from ad valorem county taxes. End of report.
George? Nothing? Okay, great. Thank you. How did the county fair go? How was attendance?
Good. I think everything was up. I haven't got any final numbers,
Oh,
but
okay.
it seemed things I attended were up. The auction was, I don't know how they continued to, excuse me,
Top it annually, but it did, and the kids made out like bandits.
that's the good part.
Good. All right. Jennifer, anything to report?
None today, thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve today's consent calendar?
So moved.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on any of the items on today's consent calendar?
If members of the public would like to address the board on the approval of today's consent calendar, please refer to the instructions in the agenda. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the approval of the consent calendar, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Dwyer. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, we'll move to item 5, and we'll open the public hearing for it at 9:07 a.m.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Brian Deason, Environmental Resources Supervisor for the district. And I'm here today to ask the board to consider adopting a negative declaration in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act for the 5-year conserved water transfer. Next slide, please. Previous board actions. The board adopted a resolution in January of 2022 declaring its intent to retain control of water that was conserved as a result of the upper main ditch piping project. That resolution was done consistent with California Water Code, which states that a water rights holder, such as EID, has the ability to sell, transfer, or otherwise use water that they conserve. More recently this year, the board approved 2 purchase and sale agreements with Westlands Water District. One of those agreements was for this conserved water transfer. The other is for a reservoir reoperation transfer, and I'll be bringing the CEQA document for the board's consideration of that action in July. But the board may recall that those agreements are conditioned upon compliance with CEQA, which is why I'm here today. Just a roadmap of the presentation for today. Provide an overview of the project, talk about the environmental review process, talk about comments we received on the document, and then finally ask the board to adopt the initial study. So a little bit about the project. This project involves the transfer of water that was conserved as part of the upper main ditch piping project. The project would transfer up to 740 acre-feet of water annually to Westlands Water District for a 5-year period through 2028.
Wasn't our estimate of conserved water around about twice that much?
Yeah, so there's a number of factors that affect the amount of water that is available for transfer. You may be familiar with or referring to approximately, on average, an 1,800 acre-feet per year conservation. And one thing that affects that number is we're only able to get credit for water available for transfer during the transfer window, so July through September.
Okay.
Whereas that other number is an annual number.
Thank you.
And let me just add, these are kind of negotiations with the Bureau of Reclamation, and they hold the key. So this is, I think, the best we could have expected to date. Hopefully in the future, there's more availability for transfer, but both Brian and Elizabeth had done an excellent job in trying to negotiate that amount with the Bureau.
Well, this kind of sets a precedent, I think, in the state, doesn't it? And, yeah, so it's probably breaking new ground, so to speak, in the water. Are there other conserved water transfer agreements that are approved by the department?
There have been other petitions that have been approved, but they are limited. So
Okay, thanks.
we're in an elite group.
Okay.
And thank you, Jim, for mentioning our coordination with Reclamation. This has been a multi-year effort with EID staff negotiating with Reclamation to come up with a methodology that is agreeable to them. And I did want to, as Jim did also, acknowledge Ms. Leeper's role in that effort to successfully negotiate an outcome. And finally, as with any water transfer, this water is not needed to meet district demands. Next slide, please. The project objectives. We're looking to put this conserved water to beneficial use. Water transfers are also a great source of non-rate revenue, so real benefit to EID customers, where we're able to generate funds to offset EID operations. That being said, I do want to emphasize that there's a number of factors affecting water transfers and whether or not they can occur in any given year. And many of those factors are beyond EID's control. So while when they do happen, it's great, but there's no guarantee. So I want to talk a little bit more about the source of this water. As I had mentioned, the Upper Main Ditch piping project. We replaced the Upper Main Ditch with the main pipeline, a new piped conveyance that goes from the El Dorado 4 Bay to Reservoir 1 water treatment plant. That was completed in 2022. The purpose of that project, the primary purposes, was to conserve water that was historically lost through seepage and evaporation in the open, unlined Upper Main Ditch. So what that means is EID can now meet the same customer demands using the main pipeline because we are not subject to those losses we experienced conveying water through the Upper Main Ditch. So meet the same demands with less water.
The pipeline also had some other advantages, I think, like reduced contamination of the water during the transfer from adjacent properties that were agriculture or animal intensive. And so I think there were many benefits of doing that project.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Just to add, I can talk about this now, but I have very, very explicit information that when meth lab was being done, they were throwing their waste products in the ditch. As the statute of limitations is over, but it was very, very easily contaminated.
Yes, well, yeah, thank you for highlighting those other benefits of the main pipeline. Okay. So now with us diverting less water for consumptive purposes, we are able to use that water for hydropower generation, or in the event that the powerhouse is offline, that conserved water stays in stream in the South Fork of the American River and flows to Folsom Reservoir. Next slide, please. So this is a schematic of just to help follow the water. This slide focuses on EID facilities down to Folsom Reservoir. So Folsom Reservoir is on the left of this schematic. The El Dorado Diversion Dam near Kybers is on the right. This is obviously not to scale. We do have, connecting those is the South Fork of the American River. That's the blue line on the top. So EID diverts water at the El Dorado Diversion Dam into the El Dorado Canal. It's conveyed for 22 miles to the 4 Bay. From the 4 Bay, water can either be diverted for consumptive purposes through the main pipeline, or formerly the upper main ditch, or it can be routed to the El Dorado powerhouse for power generation before returning to the South Fork of the American River and flowing to Folsom. So the source of this conserved water comes from that segment between the El Dorado Forebay and Res 1 water treatment plant, where the main pipeline replaced the upper main ditch. Next slide, please. So this is zooming out a little bit. The EID facilities that were on the previous schematic, the powerhouse, the forebay, and the main pipeline, are over on the right. EID's service area is the blue hatch mark area, and the red line is the flow path of the transfer water. And you can see Folsom Reservoir called out there on the western side of EID's service area. Reclamation's role in this is they will be re-regulating the water, conveying it through Folsom, releasing to the Lower American River, where it would flow to the Sacramento River, down to the Delta. And if you just want to highlight, Antioch is down in the kind of lower portion of this slide, just for reference on the next slide. So now you can see Antioch is up in the upper left-hand corner. So this shows the water's flow path down to Westland's Water District service area, which is the golden hashtag or hashed service area there at the bottom right. So water would flow, be rediverted at federal or state pumping facilities, and then conveyed south through the canal system for either temporary storage in San Luis Reservoir or conveyance directly to Westland's Water District. Next slide, please. And so, as previously mentioned, by contract, the amount of water available in any given year would be up to 740 acre-feet. That actual quantity could be less, though, in any given year, depending on what hydrologic conditions are. A function of how we calculate the amount of water conserved for transfer is also dependent on our Res 1 demands. So several factors that will affect that number. Next slide,
Brian,
please.
I think an important thing to point out is that this isn't water that our ratepayers are conserving. We're not asking them, it's not coming out of their end of the pipeline, so to speak. Sometimes that information gets out there and it gets confusing. So this is water that would not be used otherwise, that we're getting some financial benefit from.
Absolutely, yeah. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to talk about the environmental review process. As the board is aware, prior to approving a project, they must consider the environmental effects associated with that action. This is pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, as well as CEQA guidelines, and EID has its own procedures for implementing CEQA. Next slide. So the purpose of the CEQA process is to describe and disclose potential environmental effects associated with a project, and if there are any potentially significant impacts, to find ways to minimize or reduce those impacts. It also promotes coordination with our agencies as well as the public. For this project, EID is the lead agency under CEQA. Staff has reviewed and evaluated the project in the initial study that was included in your board packet. That analysis concluded that there is no potentially significant effects associated with the project. No mitigation was necessary. And when that's the conclusion of the analysis, a negative declaration is the appropriate CEQA document. Next slide, please. We did extensive public review above and beyond what CEQA requires. This is our standard distribution to all the various agencies, entities, and interested parties. Next slide, please. We did receive 3 comment letters, one from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Delta Stewardship Council, as well as the California Department of Water Resources. Comments were related to potential impacts to Folsom Coldwater Pool, comments on tracking and reporting of the conserved water, as well as conveyance through the Delta, and finally, comments regarding the methodology for calculating the amount of water available for transfer. Next slide, please. While CEQA does not require an agency to prepare responses to comments for a negative declaration, EID's procedures for implementing CEQA do. And so we have provided written comments and included those in the board's packet so you can fully consider the responses and the comments. Staff's assessment was that no comments required a substantial revision to the document. There were no significant effects identified in the comments, and essentially no changes to the negative declaration findings or conclusions were necessary. Next slide. So I'm here to ask the board to complete the CEQA review by adopting the negative declaration. This does not commit EID to go forward with the project in any given year, but it does demonstrate that the board has reviewed and considered the environmental effects prior to approving the project. I have a few slides on where we're at now. As we've mentioned, the project does require reclamation approval. That form of approval comes in the form of a Warren Act contract for conveying and storing water through federal facilities. For this particular project, we've also included the option to use state facilities in the event that federal facilities do not have capacity. So the project may also require a conveyance agreement with the California Department of Water Resources. We think in this year, it's most likely that it would be conveyed through federal facilities. So we've been working with Reclamation to help facilitate their environmental review. They currently have their environmental assessment for compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act out for public review, which ends on June 29th. The coordination of that contract is the buyer's responsibility, so Westlands would be working with Reclamation on that effort. And timeline. So as I mentioned earlier, the transfer period for conserved water is July through September. Due to the generally wet or normal hydrologic conditions this year, there may not be capacity, quite frankly, to convey this water. However, I remain optimistic, and we want to be ready in the event that they are able to move this water through the facilities. It is a relatively small amount of water. So the board's adoption of this negative declaration would satisfy CEQA for the next 5 years in the event that transfers are an option during that time frame. And you may recall that the purchase and sale agreement that was with Westlands was for 2024 alone. So the board would have the option to negotiate future purchase and sale agreements 2025 through 2028. Next slide. So board options. Option 1, adopt the proposed negative declaration. Make the following CEQA findings. Based on the whole record, there is no substantial evidence that the project will have a significant effect on the environment. The negative declaration reflects EID's independent judgment and analysis. Specify that documents or other material which constitute the record of proceedings upon which this decision is based shall be in the custody of the clerk to the board at El Dorado Irrigation District headquarters. Recommend option 1.
Move 1.
Second.
All right, is there any board comment or question? Laurie?
Link. Okay, now it's working. Thank you very much for your presentation. As one of the board members who has gone into the negotiations at the Aqua conferences like we did in April and we've done in the past, I want to congratulate our attorney, our assistant attorney, who does a really good work, and so do you, on making sure all of our dots, our i's are dotted and our t's are crossed in order to be able to have this work. And this is my 5th year here, but in those 5 years, I've watched and witnessed this happen, and you do a superb job on it. I think people, ratepayers need to understand that because of we're blessed with abundance of water, but because of this, we're able to share this water and bring money back into our coffers that helps reduce or keeps our rates down. So it's to the benefit of the ratepayers that we do this, and much appreciation.
Thank you.
All right, is there any public comment on the negative declaration during this public hearing?
If members of the public would like to address the board on public hearing item number 5, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Day, it doesn't appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on public hearing item number 5. Option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, action item number 6, well, do we need to close the public hearing at 9:27 a.m. for item 5? We'll move to item 6, general warrant registers. We need to pay our bills. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Chair, I will be recusing myself from this vote.
All right, Director Verkamp will be recusing. Is there any public comment on option 1 on item 6?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 6, please refer to the instructions in the agenda. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 6. Option 1, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Dwyer, with Director Verkamp recusing himself. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, thank you. We'll move to item 7.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Kaylee DeLongchamp. I'm an associate engineer here at the district. I am here to talk about the City of Placerville's Placerville Drive Hangtown Creek Bridge project. This is for a design and construction responsibility and reimbursement agreement between both the city and EID, as well as for some project funding for this project. So this project was included in the CIP that was adopted in last year for the 2024-2028 period. So summary of the issue, the city is replacing the Placerville Drive Hangtown Creek Bridge. As part of that, we have an existing water line currently located on that bridge that will need to be replaced in conjunction with the city's project. The district is responsible for the relocation costs, given that the existing water line is located within the city right-of-way. So we would like to partner with the city for efficiencies in design and go ahead and have their design consultant perform the design. Excuse me. So this is just a kind of brief overview of where the project is and how it comes together. So we have that existing water line. It is within the limits of their bridge project. The water line goes over the Creek on the bridge and will need to be relocated as part of their project. This is a bridge that they are going to be replacing. As you can see, it was in 1931 is when it was built, so it needs an update. So the city awarded a design contract to Dewberry Engineers back in 2018. They then started to work on the environmental for the project and actually got NEPA clearance back in the end of 2022. They then started into the design for the bridge. It's a pretty complex design, so they've taken a while to get there. They're currently working on their 65% submittal for the design of the bridge and reached out to us about what we wanted to do with our water line. So we need to relocate about 360 lineal feet of the water line, and there's also 3 fire hydrants that we're going to move as part of the project. We'll also be replacing those with newer hydrants, just as upgrading our infrastructure as we do this. So this will include both the bridge casing, transitions on and off the bridge, and as well as some appurtenances.
Can you help me a little bit on the responsibility of EID and our infrastructure and the city of Placerville? I know we supply treated water to the city for distribution. So is this pipeline obviously it's our responsibility even though it's within the city?
So it's within the city, but this is actually our pipeline. It is not part of the city's infrastructure to service their customers. This services the EID customers.
Oh, thank you.
So the anticipated schedule, design is going to start for at least our portion and as well as finish up the city's portion of design, hopefully by spring of 2025. They then need to go through some right-of-way acquisition with the bridge changing the alignment slightly. They're going to need a little bit more right-of-way out there, so they're going to work on that in the summer of 25 with construction bidding to follow acquisition. Given this, construction is likely in spring of 2026 is when it's going to start, with the amendment for the construction portion coming to you guys in the fall of 25. So this board item, it's an agreement with the city, and then the project funding is only for the design at this point. We are not getting construction funding. We're going to wait until we get construction bids to come back to you for construction funding. So design contract with Dewberry is $125,049. Capitalized labor to review their design and work with them to make sure we get a good product in the end.
How many customers are served by this pipeline, EID customers?
So this is part of a loop system within the city limits, but this is part of the pipeline that is fed from the Reservoir 6 section. I'm not sure off the top of my head exact number of customers off of this pipeline.
Okay, thanks.
So option 1 is approve a utility agreement between the City of Placerville and the El Dorado Irrigation District for the replacement of pipeline and approve funding in the amounts of $125,000, $49 for design and $45,000 for capitalized labor, for a total funding request of $170,049 associated with the City of Placerville's Placerville Drive Hangtown Creek Bridge Replacement Project, project number 24027.01. I recommend option 1.
I'll move option 1 with a comment.
I'll second.
There was a lot of federal money available to replace old and aging and insufficient bridges. Did the city of Placerville apply for or receive any of that, I'll call it grant money for infrastructure improvement?
I am not positive on exactly, but I do believe they were working on trying to get some grant funding for this project.
Can we piggyback on that and have them pay for the federal, since they're doing the bridge, shouldn't they pay for our pipeline relocation as well?
Unfortunately, because the pipeline is our pipeline and it's within the city limits, they can't pay for the pipeline.
Dang. Thanks.
Just for the record, I believe there was a slight change in the wording to the option since we prepared the PowerPoint. So just for the record, the option is approve a design and construction responsibility and reimbursement agreement with the City of Placerville for the Placerville Drive Bridge Replacement Project and approve funding in the amounts of $125,049 for design and $45,000 for capitalized labor, for a total funding request of $170,049 for the Placerville Drive Hangtown Creek Bridge Replacement Project, project number 24027.01, as listed on the agenda.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was about to.
Director Dwyer, do you, as the motion maker, you accept that change?
Yes, my motion stands as the revised option 1.
Second concurs.
Is there any public comment on item 7?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 7, please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 7, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Veerkamp. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move to item 8. Ms. Carrington?
Good morning, members of the board. Liz Carrington, Senior Civil Engineer here at the district. Alrighty, today I will be presenting just project funding for the wastewater collections, SCADA, and PLC upgrades project. Next slide. Previous board actions, this project was included in the latest capital improvement plan, subject to available funding. Summary of issues. The current telemetry equipment that supports the wastewater lift stations is obsolete and no longer available. The master PLC is at capacity and we cannot add additional lift stations as they are upgraded to our system. Next slide.
Liz, can you just say what?
Oh, yes. For the record, to define SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. And then PLC is programmable logic controller. Thank you. In sum, the district maintains 60 wastewater lift stations throughout our sewer service area. These stations have varying genres of PLCs, some 5 years old and some 45 years old. The current telemetry equipment is obsolete and no longer available for purchase. And even if we could purchase these older radios that we have in our service area, the new PLCs are not compatible with the legacy serial connections that we have for lift stations moving forward. Also, the master PLC is at capacity. Right now we have remote programmable logic controls at all of our sites. They connect to a master PLC, and then the master PLC converts the data and puts it into our SCADA system. So it's kind of a phased approach. Next slide. So to address these issues, we'll need to find a solution that satisfies multiple project objectives. One, it accommodates all the different genres of PLCs. Unfortunately, we don't have the staffing or the availability to upgrade all of the PLCs all at once, but we do need to maintain communications as we're stepping through our upgrades. Also, we need to find a solution that's compatible with all the future PLC upgrades. And lastly, we need to find a solution that's reliable and secure as we're conveying data over this hilly terrain that we have. So unfortunately, cell service is out of the question for us. Next slide. All right, so moving forward, in order to step through this very complex issue, staff decided to look at our radio network first. Right now, we convey communications over the radio network, and so whatever solution that we implement moving forward, we wanted to have another system that we can operate in parallel. That's so as we're upgrading our systems, we can have both systems running independently and maintain our communication at all times. So that radio study is complete. The next step was to identify a hardware solution that would satisfy all of our needs of the district. We have since identified that hardware solution, and so the next step is to purchase the hardware, configure all of the firewalls to make sure that we're nice and secure, develop a SCADA template so that we can really take out our master PLC. Our master PLC has been a single point of failure. It has failed before, and staff has reacted to try to get it up to speed. But luckily, our solution that we've decided to implement, it's going from the remotes straight into our SCADA system, so we don't have that single point of failure anymore. Also, we'll need to physically install all of the hardware at all the different lift stations, and then we'll need to cut the system over one at a time. I did want to note that work will be performed by district staff, which is 50 to 100% cost savings moving forward. So this is one of those where we don't always get to do this, but when we're able to do this work in-house to save money, then we try to move forward if we can. All right, next slide. Staff is requesting funding at this time for equipment procurement, about $95,000. Professional services to support security, set up our firewall system for $50,000. Professional SCADA services to support that SCADA transition, about $75,000. Capitalized labor, this is again substantially higher than normal, but the capitalized labor is to perform all of that work to actually install the hardware. It's our telemetry folks, it's our E&I staff, it's our SCADA staff to make this transition. It's $140,000, and then contingency for $36,000 for a total funding request of $396,000 for this project.
An observation that the equipment cost is about a quarter of the total cost of the project. $100,000 for equipment and $300,000 to install it, and configure and program and do all those things. So just interesting.
It took quite some time to find that right solution. We've tried different type of modules through each of our sites. We did a bunch of pilot testings, and we finally found something that works. And to your point, ironically, the actual solution is the cheapest part. It's actually getting it to the finish line. So it takes time. Yep.
Just
This is all coming out of wastewater funds?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to reiterate, the DUI or the DIY is do it yourself, and actually as someone who's come from project management to install the equipment from managerial down to the tech, I mean, it's really good for them all to understand these new products, and that way they can calibrate it to the way they need it. So it does save us money. And the employees learn. And I'm assuming they're getting training modules or things on how to update, right?
Yes, yes. And our
It's
staff,
included in the purchase?
yes, and our staff has been part of the whole process from the very beginning. In fact, our staff was the ones that were going to the trade shows, looking for all these new products. And so they really brought that product solution to me, and we discussed it. And so, it'll be great for installation.
Another 20 years after they upgrade.
Absolutely, we can maintain it too. So that's
I mean, this is an old system, so, yeah.
very true. Yes, thank you. Next slide. All right, board options. Authorized funding of $95,000 for equipment procurement, $50,000 for professional services to support security, $75,000 for, and I'm going to define this for the record, supervisory control and data acquisition, professional services, $140,000 for capitalized labor, and $36,000 in contingencies for a total funding request of $396,000 for the wastewater collections, supervisory control and data acquisition and programmable logic controller upgrades project number 24019.01. Recommendation option 1.
I'll move option 1.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any other board comment or question? Any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 8, please refer to the agenda for instructions. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 8, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move to item 9. Consider adopting the 2024 Water and Recycle Water Master Plan. Brian?
Okay, good morning. This is essentially the same presentation that I went through, so I'll try to go a little bit quicker, or we can just go straight to questions if there's any, but I'll move through fairly quickly. last board meeting, actually in June 10th, I presented the workshop format for this master plan. And then we headed down to El Dorado Hills for a site visit of the El Dorado Hills water treatment plant, or since that time, we were considering renaming it the MacGyver treatment plant of El Dorado Hills. It's in the works. So in summary, we've completed the water and recycled water master plan that updated our 2013 integrated water master plan. It was overly due for an update. And the focus of that was the infrastructure needs of our system through the 2045 planning horizon, and we also looked at future build-out condition as well in that infrastructure. We looked at both existing demands, we looked at the projected demands in 2045 and build-out, like I just mentioned, and then tried to identify phasing of improvements, of the many improvements that will be needed over that planning estimate, planning timeframe. Next slide. First, on the water supply and demand side, from our urban water management plan, these are some tables, and just the gist here is that we're very well off on our water supply compared with our demands at this time, and into the future. We have excess water supplies through 2045. So again, this is on the left hand picture that depicts our water system service area. And then on the right-hand side is the annual demands, starting with existing demands of about 35,000 acre-feet per year on average, rising to about 40,000 acre-feet by 2045, and then way out to build out close to 60,000 acre-feet or so.
I think, Brian, as you had pointed out last time, the build-out, trying to figure out build-out, it's not a hard and fast date.
Right.
It's a very vague.
Yeah, this graph is misleading because you can project that 2045 from now to 2045 is the same time frame as 2045 to build out, but build out is just a theoretical number. There's no time frame associated with that if it ever occurs at all. It's just,
Yeah, I think what's important is that I know the county has revised down their growth projections, and frankly, I think they probably need to revise them down either further. The Department of State Finance is projecting, I believe, that there's potential negative growth in El Dorado County. We're aging, and we don't have a lot of new people, even though it seems a little different when you're down in El Dorado Hills, but it's not for the whole county. Not a lot of new people moving in and a lot of older folks aging out, so to speak. So, I think we need to be very cautious on our adding additional capacity because of those factors.
yeah, and the growth rate, again, these are from the Urban Water Management Plan that was prepared in 2021 and adopted in 2021. That included, we worked with the county on, what they're assuming for growth rate and try to plug that same growth rate into our demand projections. So the slope of that line from existing to 2045 represents about a 1% growth rate, which was the previous county's growth rate. They've since recently revised that to 0.62%. So when we update our urban water management plan in a couple of years, that will reflect that lower growth rate as well. So yeah, around 2045, we expect that demand to even be lower than what's shown here. This chart just reflects our peak demands, and really the emphasis of the master plan again is infrastructure. So we're really looking at the peak demands, not just annual demands. So this reflects peak demands from our various sources combined. You can see prior to 2013, they were pretty high. We went through the drought in 2014 through 2016, and then have slowly creeped up in peak demands since then. Again, for water demand projections, looking out into the future, we try to identify all the various new development proposals within the county. You can see a lot of them here. And again, most of these are centered around the western side of our system near in El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park area. Next slide. And then this is the resulting water demand projection on a peak, and both on an average and a peak day projection. So by 2045, we expect the average daily demand would be about 35 MGD with a peak demand of about 70 million gallons per day. Looking at our water treatment plant capacity, we looked at the capacity of each of our water treatment plants, comparing that with those peak demands. And the news here is that we have adequate combined capacity. If we had no infrastructure bottlenecks in our system, we have adequate water treatment plant capacity to serve our customers and future customers through 2045 and even longer. It's just that we don't have the pipelines between the treatment plants to move that water. So as a result, especially looking at El Dorado Hills, we've identified the need to expand El Dorado Hills water treatment plant in the near term to relieve some of the bottlenecks while we build additional transmission mains in the future, which I'll show some of those slides. These are some of the modeling results. This one is our system and all the pipelines and storage tanks in our system. And this is simulating our peak demands for existing, today's summertime demands on average. So you can see the pipelines that have kind of a thicker line and some different colors shows some areas of concerns where we have higher velocities than we should be trying to meet those demands. And we have the orange and red dots showing some potential low pressure areas as a result of inadequate transmission capacity. So we're starting to see issues arising from existing demands that we're managing through. But as you know, with future development and future growth, those will continue to gain steam without new infrastructure. Next slide. This is the 2045 simulated demands, showing a little bit worsening of conditions without additional infrastructure again. And then the next slide is the build-out demands, really showing the system basically blowing up without additional infrastructure. Just a lot of issues in the Diamond Springs, Cameron Park, El Dorado Hills area. So to solve those conditions, we looked at different concepts for infrastructure to resolve that. We looked at the White Rock diversion and the new treatment plant that was part of the old master plan in 2013. That's the orange area there. As I mentioned, since we have adequate water treatment plant capacity, the purple identified transmission mains would help to resolve the deficiencies that we just showed by just adding new transmission essentially between Reservoir A water treatment plant up near Sly Park, all the way down to the Bass Lake Road area. And then the pink area is the El Dorado Hills water plant expansion. So as far as a recommendation, we've come up with kind of a combination of both El Dorado Hills expansion and fully utilizing Res 1 and Res A through transmission upgrades. I mentioned this last time, but we did look at, since the White Rock was a prominent part of our last master plan, we looked at the cost of that, updated the cost of that compared with just running new transmission mains down from Reservoir A to Cameron Park. And so the story here is that basically the capital costs are the same between those two options, but the White Rock diversion with a new treatment plant, new pump stations associated with that have a higher O&M cost and a higher NPV. So we eliminated the consideration of the White Rock diversion with this master plan, recommending instead to utilize our existing capacity, not add a new treatment plant, and install the adequate transmission main to help with that.
Yeah, Brian, just to reiterate your point about O&M costs, because you went through that pretty quickly. But adding a new treatment plant adds operational costs to O&M, operations and maintenance, meaning that we'll have to have additional plant operators to manage that plant, which raises our operations cost as opposed to using our existing treatment plants and just increasing the capacity of those. So not only is there, there's a cost savings by not doing this option.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, we looked at, just as you said, adding new treatment plant, along with the capital costs, it's got just ongoing additional labor costs. You have to staff that plant with new staff, presumably. And then there's at least one or potentially two pretty large pump stations associated with the White Rock. One pump station to get water out of the canyon from the American River up into the Placerville area. And then likely there would be a finished water pump station at the treatment plant to get the pressure high enough where it could be injected into our existing water system. So both of those two were the primary factors there on the O&M side.
Brian, how much does our per capita water use is trending down? It's a combination of people being more efficient, new homes being more efficient, smaller lots, et cetera. How much does that factor into your projections or into your revision in a couple of years?
We did factor that in with the annual demands for from the Urban Water Management Plan. I want to say for existing customers, we assumed existing customers were pretty much flat, like there wouldn't be an increase in demand for existing. But the new customers that would presumably hook up to our system had a much lower demand, at least 10%. I think just off the cuff, I think existing, we count on existing residential use to be about a half an acre foot per year. New customers, we assumed, I think it was about 0.4 acre feet per year.
I think when I started here, it was around 3/4 of an acre
Yeah.
foot.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just like to add on the Alder project, there's still a lot of uncertainty with Alder. Permitting agreements with other folks to get that project moving, and just tying into our existing treatment plants and running a parallel transmission line may be challenging, but it's not as challenging as the other alternative. Not Alder, I meant White Rock.
White Rock.
Yeah.
Just a question. We want to keep our agricultural endeavors at a maximum, and what is the demand difference between apples and vineyards? I mean, this is a really important part of our economy in this county is Apple Hill and all the environs and Somerset and whatever. I just wondered how this factors into our demand.
Question, I don't know the answer to between apples and vineyards. I think our
Well,
total.
just off the top of your head.
I just-
Hey, Chuck, do you want to answer that question?
I'd say a lot of that depends on a lot of factors. If you have a big apple crop hanging on the tree like last year, they're probably going to use a little more water than your average vineyard is because you have to keep that fruit viable all the way to harvest. Younger vineyards are going to use a lot more. I'd say I know that the water agency is currently working on a validation study, which is looking at this exact question. So there should be data available, probably I'd say within 6 months that EID could use to answer those exact questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
For the record, that was Chuck Mansfield.
I'll just add, I believe our agricultural demand district-wide is between 10 and 15% of our total demand, so it's a pretty big chunk. Let's see, so these are the proposed water system improvements, kind of all captured in one slide here. So I'll just focus, starting with the El Dorado Hills water improvements. We plan and this is within our 5-year CIP and something we talked about at the tour. We have funds planned for the El Dorado Hills Water Plant expansion to 24 MGD. The current capacity is 19.5, so we're planning an expansion of that, about 4.5 MGD of new capacity, as well as replacing a lot of the aging components that we discussed at that plant. With that expansion, we believe, and we'll look at this more as we get more into details, a new water main would be needed coming out of the water plant, going down Francisco Drive, potentially to meet up with a new or an existing large diameter pipeline in Silver Valley Road and Green Valley Road. So that's that little segment there. And then a little bit farther south at our Oak Ridge tanks, a new Oak Ridge pump station that would pump that supply as needed up into the Bass Lake tanks area. And what that would do is, for a while, it would relieve some of the bottlenecks that we're seeing in our gravity transmission mains. Give us time to start constructing the high priority transmission segments, these purple segments. We likely would be starting up in the Pleasant Valley area with a new transmission main starting at a Reservoir C storage site, heading down and gradually going west. So from Reservoir C to Reservoir 7 would be one segment that's high priority, and then another pipeline going through the Diamond Springs, town of Diamond Springs, to relieve some bottlenecks there. And then there's another line. This is starting from Reservoir 11, going into the Shingle Springs area, and then eventually connecting into the Bass Lake tanks, Bass Lake Road. Very expensive pipeline. All of these are very expensive pipelines, but this one is a pretty large segment. We plan to be talking with the Morrow Valley and Lime Rock development. They have plans to develop here in the fairly near term. They're moving along with some planning. So we plan to look at them and see, you know, what options we can do to have that infrastructure be installed with their development. This is a wrap up the capital costs. These are very high level costs, master plan level costs for all the different improvements. It totals up to about $1.2 billion. And then we also, as I mentioned, we looked at some build out improvements as well, and this is really identified as EDM number 3. This is eventually, once we get that far down the road, we'll be needing to construct another parallel line on the north side of our system to replace capacity as those pipelines are aging and provide new capacity on the north side of our system. This is the cash flow estimate for all those different costs, and you can see, I think just a summary here is that we've tried to limit as much as we can the expenditures in the next 5 years to try to match our financial plan, and those primarily, again, are consisting of the improvements at El Dorado Hills. And then once we start hitting into the 2030s, mid-2030s, we'll really need to start having some funds available for the gravity transmission lines from Pleasant Valley on down. This is just another chart showing different way to show it. The phase 1, next 5 years or so, about $125 million of expenditures, and then the expenditures really start ramping up in between phase 2 and phase 3, and then the phase 4 is really the beyond 2045, which is really don't know when that will occur or if ever, but that's another 2045 to build out type of expenditure. The recycled water system really doesn't need a whole lot of, I guess is the good news, besides just we'll need to, you know, have some funds preserved for just ongoing replacement and rehab as the recycled water system ages, but there's really no expansion of capacity needed from the recycled water system. The number of additional recycled water connections are projected to be very low. Just every once in a while some infill type of developments, but there's really not a large plan for a new dual plumbed area or anything like that. There potentially could be with the old executive golf course. I think that's the most likely, if any. as far as a new recycled water expansion and development.
Has Marble Valley, Lime Rock, way back when, they were kicking around or talking about the idea of recycled water, have they walked away from that? Are they pretty much moving towards potable?
I believe so, yeah. I think we'll still talk about it, but I think just, it's kind of driven by EID staff that, hey, we just really don't have the supply. It's going to require additional supplementation that we just don't want.
Yeah, we'd need them to build
well, so.
a new storage
Right.
reservoir, so to speak, I think, to make it work, and that's a lot of dollars.
Yep. The master plan is considered a project from CEQA, so we did some environmental review for the master plan adoption. It is exempt from CEQA just on the basis that it's a planning level study. Any of the future infrastructure improvements, as we get closer to actually building those, will be subject to CEQA review. So staff will file a notice of exemption if the board adopts this plan. And then finally, in the summary, again, we'll be the district will be needing to expend some pretty significant dollars between now and 2045. The growth projections of the county that we mentioned, they may extend with lower projections, it may help as far as the timing of those improvements, but nevertheless, eventually we're going to need to still spend some pretty big dollars on these infrastructure improvements. The near-term improvements are included with El Dorado Hills Water Plant and the Oak Ridge Pump Station. We'll start updating those projections and plugging some of those new projects with the CIP process this fall. And then also, again, look for different ways of doing things. Maybe, as time goes on, we'll identify some better ways to solve the infrastructure issue. Look for grants as well. And as I mentioned, where applicable, we can look at the development community to help fund some of these improvements as well. The last bullet was the facility capacity charge update. We mentioned this last time. We're pretty far along in the FCC update. We'll be bringing that to the board later this year as well, and trying to include some of these projects in the master plan into the FCC update. So board options, option 1 is to adopt the 2024 water and recycled water master plan, and recommend option 1.
I'll move option 1 with a request that I know it's online and available, but I request that we send a copy, probably under the general manager's signature, to the water agency, just to formalize that communication. Thanks.
I'll second with a comment that reminding everybody this is a blueprint. I mean, it's our best guesstimate, and there's so many variables, and I think the growth rate is one of them. There's some projects on the horizon, but getting them to the finish line in El Dorado County is a very, very tough thing to do, especially with state infrastructure requirements and regulations.
So just a comment, and probably should have brought that up earlier. 21 years from now, will you be here?
I sure hope so.
So I guess my biggest question is, when we do these master plans, the master plans go out, but even LAFCO does a 10-year plan, don't they?
Roughly.
Yeah. And why wouldn't it make sense to just do this for 10 years at a time?
Do a master plan update every 10
Yes,
years?
like
or-
this. Yeah, instead of doing 21 years, what you're doing.
Oh. Yeah,
Do
for
you
this,
understand? Because we're not building out, and I'm not saying that we're not building out. What I'm saying is, you hit those goals a lot better when the term is shorter. And it just makes sense to me. You kind of like you said, it's kind of like you're just throwing darts in the air and thinking this might work 21 years from now. I don't think I'll be here, but you just never know.
We can certainly do that, but just put it in perspective. The Intertie project was built in '77, and I think in '90, when was the next drought? It was in the 90s, I think. And it was, oh, we need to do it right away, need to do it right away. Well, it took us 20-plus years to get the Intertie project going. So some of these are long lead time things, but certainly we wouldn't bring a project to the board unless we refine those variables like growth and, capacity and really some of the infrastructure like El Dorado Hills, as you all saw 2 weeks ago, those assets are falling apart. So it may be not a capacity expansion, it may be replacement of assets and maybe a little capacity expansion as we move forward.
I think it's always good to, even though we know it's all just estimating and guesstimating, as you said, to look long-term, just to reduce the chance of something falling between the cracks. And so we can anticipate. And we do 10-year and we do 5-year planning as we get closer and refine it more. But I think it's good to have this master plan to help us and the public look at, well, this is what it takes to keep things going. And we need to anticipate this, that it may or may not happen, but we need to be thinking about it just in case. So.
Another great example is, we were all excited about what the White Rock penstock is in our long-term plan. Well, as we refine this, that's off the table now, and we want to utilize our existing capacity, which I think is a nice change. Again, we won't need it for another 10 years or 20 years, but it's always good to update it, and then as we get closer, you have a 5 or 10-year CIP that really starts refining it.
Yeah, and I think that's good. The White Rock always had a lot of big question marks of the infrastructure costs, the running, getting the water, like the South County or something like that. You had hundreds of millions just for that. Really wasn't, it was very questionable, and it's nice to see. And I do agree, I think better to improve what we have where we can. George, do you have anything?
Yeah, just how we're doing on the facility capacity charge update. Where are we in that arena?
Yeah, we've got some draft methodology and some numbers that we're planning to show the Builders Industry Association, the BIA, and local developers. We've got a meeting scheduled on July 9th with them just to give them a preview and any comments from that. And then we plan to bring that to the board the first meeting of August.
And when?
August. I think
Oh,
it's
August,
12th.
okay. All right.
For review or approval?
We haven't talked about that yet, but we could bring it, as an informational item to take a look and then come back for
I think that'd be
adoption.
good to get feedback from the folks on the outside and then bring it back for our feedback. Yeah. Is there any public comment on item 9? All right, no one.
I had a little computer problem there. If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 9, please refer to the instructions on today's agenda. President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 9. Option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Veerkamp. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, Brian. All right, we'll be adjourning, moving to closed session A. Counselor, do we have a time estimate?
Yes, thank you, President Day. The board will be meeting in closed session for the item listed as closed session item A on today's agenda. I estimate that discussion will take approximately 25 minutes.
Okay, so we will return about 10:40 a.m., but it may be later than that.
And for the public, for the purposes of this Zoom session, we will shut down the Zoom session and reopen once the board reconvenes after closed session.